This week's is our 100th episode of Dashcam Stories, and to mark the occasion, we've compiled an entire video of nothing but crazy wrecks and brutal collisions. Buckle up, because today, you'll need it. Our first submitter this week also sent us our first submission we've featured from Kuwait. He watched the driver of a sedan speed past him before losing control, sideswiping an SUV, and slamming into the median barrier. Our submitter told us he stopped and checked on the driver of the sedan before notifying the police of the collision. He told us the driver was crying, and he also pointed out that the driver of the SUV left the scene. This submitter was heading across an overpass on a frigid Michigan morning when he found out the hard way that the overpass had frozen over and hadn't been salted yet. When the driver of the Jeep ahead of him spotted wrecked cars and tapped the brakes, they lost control and spun into the existing wreckage. Our submitter did the same, and this was only the beginning of a 30-vehicle pileup. Our submitter's dashcam audio includes several more impacts as more vehicles smashed into his Volkswagen Jetta. He told us several people were injured, but thankfully everyone survived. Our submitter was spared from any severe injuries, and once the overpass was shut down, he was able to retrieve his belongings from his Jetta. While this submitter was waiting at a traffic light, he watched a Jeep Grand Cherokee make an unprotected turn and get T-boned by an oncoming Ford Focus. Both drivers stopped, and so did our submitter before he called the police. Thankfully, nobody was injured by the impact. Our submitter gave copies of his dashcam footage to both the police and the Ford driver. He also found out the Ford was a rental car and that this was his third vehicle collision in 5 months. Yikes! Angela had been driving down a Missouri highway when the driver of a Ford Escape hogging the passing lane was triggered by her attempt to pass him in the travel lane. He sped up to prevent her pass, then brake-checked her. Eventually, the Ford driver got into the travel lane, but when Angela passed him in the passing lane, he swerved into her Nissan Altima, clipping the fender before losing control and barreling into the median. The Ford Escape smashed through a safety fence before finally stopping. The impact nearly ripped a front wheel off and totaled the SUV. When Angela stopped and asked if he was okay, he started yelling at her. He started accusing her of swerving into his lane. Angela provided the police with her dashcam footage before continuing on her way, leaving the Ford driver to wait for a tow truck for his wrecked vehicle. Thankfully, she's able to continue driving her Altima while waiting for his insurance provider to call her back. She said, "Get a dash cam, a good one. Don't waste your money on a cheap one. It's worth it." She also wanted to shout out her husband William, who watches the latest Wham Bam videos with her every week. If you want to be sure you never miss an episode, hit that subscribe button. Chrissy was driving her Subaru Ascent when an oncoming driver made an unprotected turn across her lane. Both drivers stopped and waited for the police. Sadly, both vehicles were totaled. The other driver claimed he'd had a green arrow and that Chrissy's light must have been red. Thankfully, she was able to send her dashcam footage to his insurance provider, and they immediately accepted full responsibility. If you need a dashcam, check the description for our recommendation. Mike's wife was on her way to work when traffic ahead of her came to a stop. When she noticed the driver behind her was not slowing down, she turned the wheel so her Honda Accord wouldn't be pushed into the SUV ahead of her. Both the Ford Explorer and her Honda were rendered undrivable by the impact, with the Honda ultimately being totaled. Both vehicles had to be towed away, but thankfully, nobody was injured. Mike told us they sent their dashcam footage to the Ford driver's insurance provider, and they immediately accepted full liability. Jarko was on his way to spend a weekend with family after a heavy snowfall. Even though the speed limit here is about 55 miles per hour, he was only driving 50 miles per hour when another driver pulled out in front of him.
Making an emergency call.
Jarko's Volkswagen ID.5's airbags deployed before it rolled into a ditch. First responders arrived 10 minutes later after his car automatically summoned them to the scene. Thankfully, there were no injuries. After the other driver admitted fault, Jarko's VW was taken to a shop where it will be getting repaired. The total repair cost is about $25,000, but thankfully, Jarko won't have to pay for it. Ethan was driving a company truck when the driver of an oncoming U-Haul rental truck crossed the center line and took off his side view mirror. Ethan turned around and followed the U-Haul truck until the driver pulled over, but when he tried to approach the driver to talk to them, they fled from the scene. Rather than pursuing them, Ethan let them go and is letting his employer sort things out with U-Haul. Hopefully they can identify the renter responsible and hold them accountable for the damage. This submitter was on her way to her boyfriend's house when the SUV ahead of her rear-ended another vehicle. Even though she slammed on her brakes, her Hyundai Elantra slid on the wet road and she wasn't able to stop. In total, 4 vehicles were involved in the pileup, but our submitter was the only one who didn't flee the scene. Sadly, her Hyundai was totaled by the 55-mile-per-hour impact. She's thankful she has since fully recovered from her injuries. When Trey's light turned green, there was nobody in the lane on his right as he accelerated. A few seconds later, a black Infiniti came speeding up on his right, and you know what they say, bad drivers never miss their exits. The Infiniti driver tried to cut across Trey's lane, clipping the fender of his Chevy Silverado. You'll never guess what she told the police when they responded to the scene. Trey said she claimed he had sped up and hit her, but that was before she realized he'd captured the entire incident on his dash cam. Trey's insurance provider took care of everything after the Infiniti driver apologized. Mr. E from Kentucky was headed home from the grocer E when he watched a car turn across oncoming traffic and get T-boned right in front of him. If we wind that back, we can see that the driver of a van had stopped to give the car driver a chance to turn. But this ended up causing the collision since the car driver couldn't see the car coming in the other lane. Here's a free driving lesson for you. Don't ever stop in the middle of a street to let someone else go when you have the right-of-way. We've seen many times on this channel that it's not courteous, it's dangerous. The van driver abandoned the wreckage while Mr. E stopped and called 911 before providing his dashcam footage to the victims. Thankfully, everyone survived the brutal collision. Simon was driving his Volkswagen Polo when a driver from his right ran a yield sign, and he wasn't able to avoid T-boning them. Sadly, the collision totaled Simon's VW after the repair bill exceeded $3,800. He used the insurance settlement to buy a Peugeot, and thankfully, nobody was injured. Simon is actually one of our platinum-level Patreon supporters. Check out our Patreon link in the description and come chat with Simon and the rest of the Wham Bam fam in our Discord server. Sebastian was driving with his girlfriend when highway traffic suddenly slowed down. Watch what happened behind him when a box truck couldn't stop in time. After clipping the back of an SUV, the box truck swerved into the path of a semi-truck in another lane. As it turned out, the slowdown had been caused by another collision that had happened earlier. The involved drivers pulled over while Sebastian continued, and his girlfriend Joanna called emergency services. Casey was driving for work on Christmas Eve in an area that always has heavy semi-truck traffic. Up ahead, she watched a trucker merge left, but a driver in the right lane didn't realize he was preparing to make a wide right turn. Even after the car driver slammed on the brakes, the trailer turned across its path and it was crushed underneath. Casey stopped to check on the drivers and called 911. She also provided copies of her dashcam footage to both drivers. Thankfully, there were no serious injuries. Casey wanted to shout out her cousin Brian for introducing her to Wham Bam videos, as well as her husband Paul who bought her a dashcam, and we can't leave out her kids Jay and Annie. This submitter was on his way home from a birthday party when an oncoming van made an illegal left turn across traffic before colliding with a car. Our submitter told us left turns from that direction aren't allowed here, so the car driver couldn't have expected the sudden maneuver from the van. He also told us that, as a new driver, our channel shows him what not to do. Johnny was driving through Vancouver in his BMW X4 when he watched someone in a black Audi open his door right in front of a red Honda, and the driver of the Honda had no time to react to avoid hitting the door. The Honda smashed the Audi's door forward even as the driver tried to swerve to the left. The Honda sustained damage to its front bumper cover and headlight, while the Audi's door and fender were both damaged. Johnny told us he sent a witness report to British Columbia's only car insurance provider, and he also asked us to shout out his wife, Helen. After stopping for a stop sign, Ian was proceeding through an intersection when an oncoming Jeep driver ran their stop sign and T-boned his Toyota SUV. Both drivers stopped to exchange information. Thankfully, nobody was injured, and Ian told us he's now waiting to find out how much his repairs will cost. Devin was headed to an antique store when an oncoming minivan ran a red light and got hit by another minivan. Devin stopped to check on the drivers and called 911. First responders arrived in minutes, and thankfully there were no serious injuries. He offered the police a copy of his dashcam footage, but so far they haven't responded. Brian was driving when he watched a car pull in front of him with no lights on. He tried multiple times to warn the driver by flashing his own headlights at her, but evidently she didn't get the message. Another driver didn't see the car coming and pulled out in front of it before getting T-boned. Even though his car was sent spinning, it thankfully wasn't hit by any other traffic. Brian stopped to check on the drivers. Thankfully, neither was seriously injured. He offered a copy of his dashcam footage to the responding police, but they haven't contacted him for it since then. Joey was arriving in a parking lot when the driver of a Chevy Cobalt suddenly stopped before reversing, straight into Joey's Dodge Challenger. Joey told us he'd been laying on the horn, but it didn't make any difference. The Chevy driver then blamed Joey for the collision, claiming Joey had been speeding through the parking lot before rear-ending him. He even managed to get a random bystander to corroborate his story. Thankfully, once Joey sent his dashcam footage to the other driver's insurance provider, they accepted responsibility on behalf of their customer. Joey told us the guy was even charged with insurance fraud. He got his front bumper cover replaced a few weeks later, which is great because he'd only purchased his Challenger 2 days before this happened.
Wham! Bam, we got a Patreon man. Please support the show.